our mission.
Is it disloyalty? Is it sedition? Is it treason to oppose the hands of tyranny? Never!
I will never send troops anywhere on a mission of that kind without telling them that if somebody shoots at them, they can darn well shoot back.
I know not what course others may take, but as for me, give me liberty! Oh, give me death!
A dark cloud is finally lifting across the world as U.S. military intelligence and their global partners are destroying the deep state criminal power structure that has ruled over our planet for hundreds of years.
We are free with the God-given right, and we shall not yield that right to any power on earth.
Hi, I'm Scott McKay. The world is at, and I am your host on The Tipping Point on Revolution Radio, where every Monday from 8 to 10 p.m. Eastern, we bring you the latest in this ensuing takedown of this global criminal empire.
That's an image of strength.
You'll get the raw, hard truth here on The Tipping Point. So come join us Mondays, 8 to 10 p.m. Eastern in Studio B at revolution.radio.
Thanks for listening while we take that short break here at Revolution Radio, freedomslips.com. And now we're going to get back to your host.
Greetings and welcome to Morningstar Report. I would like to ask the radio engineer to mute his mic and my co-host to mute his mic to avoid those echoes. Folks, welcome to a special edition of the Morningstar Report. Today's episode is called Beyond the Music, to honor our guest, who is none other than the lead guitarist of the famous heavy metal group Twisted Sister. His name is J.J. French, and we're going to reminisce about our 55 years, I guess, of friendship and brotherhood since boyhood. We grew up in the same neighborhood. Before we go on and bring on our guest, I want to inform you of the death of Jimmy Carter, the longest living president of the United States, who passed away yesterday at the age of 98. He will be long remembered as a man who tried his best to fight the deep state, but ultimately he lost the battle due to treachery. You've heard that story before in our episode called The October Surprise, which dealt with the book by Barbara Honegger relating how George H.W. Bush committed treason in the 1980 election by negotiating with Iran to keep Iran from freeing the hostages that they had held already for over a year. Well, they were ready to spring the hostages, but George H.W. Bush made a secret trip to Paris to negotiate with the foreign minister of Iran. And the deal he negotiated was to hold on to the hostages and not let them free until after the November elections. And that is, so he has to deal trading arms and foreign aid to Iran, of all people. And so the Iranians took the deal, and the hostages were held for another 3 months to prevent Jimmy Carter from being elected president of the United States in the 1980 election and throwing it to Ronald Reagan. And a future time, we're going to do a thorough investigation of that and the attempt by none other than George H.W. Bush to assassinate the same President Ronald Reagan who had taken on that dastardly fellow, that skull and boner, George H.W. Bush, as his vice president. It's an intriguing story. But right now, I would like to turn to my colleague, Peter Basulka, for a short briefing and a discussion of last week's big story, which was the alien invasion of the Miami Mall and all the controversy surrounding it. So I've got some big news about that. And so let me turn to Peter for a refresher on what happened last week in Miami and how it's playing out.
Sure. Well, yeah. So I'm going to just say the entire Miami police force that was on duty. I'm sure wasn't everybody, but people get my drift. It was a 9/11 showing of first responders that surrounded a 4-block square encompassing the Bayside Mall in Miami. The airspace was closed down. There were black helicopters flying around, and people were running out of that mall like it was on fire. Now, I said all those things, these facts, first, because this is what I'm sure these things happened. I'm sure that these things that I mentioned happened.
Yes.
Now, now I'm going to go into things that I don't feel in my heart, per se, the reports that are on social media, because I feel that there's been a disinformation campaign to make the whole thing sound be silly, and that if you talk of it, that you would be perceived as a silly person, right? So there were a lot of independent people that came out to say that they experienced 10-foot creatures walking around the mall. They swear, I'm paraphrasing, but they're basically, these people swear in the Bible that they were aliens from their perspective. But the police narrative is that they responded to a call of teenagers fighting with sticks and throwing fireworks around the mall. They could have been there too.
Yeah.
But the narrative doesn't make any sense to me. The whole thing is very weird. And Jen and I were out on a date night. We were driving home last night from Boca Raton. We were just listening to the local radio, and the DJ went on this thing about the aliens and the mall, and he was repeating the narrative about how silly people were to think that there were aliens there, like in DJ style. But you could tell it was paid for, built-in marketing to the guy's rap. And I was like, man, they're really going out of their way to just keep on repeating the same narrative over and over until people believe it, which is more smoke for me. But intuitively, I do think that this is my perspective, I do think that there was some type of paranormal event, like aliens did show up.
Yep.
And from my perspective, I think it was kind of like just a mischieful thing, like let's freak out the humans or something, stuff like that, like humans would do to other old people, and they did freak everybody out.
That's good. That's good.
Yeah.
Well, the reason I brought it up is that Peter was on a cruise off the Bahamas, I would say, and he called me in the early morning, and I said, right. Peter knows I like to sleep late, but he calls me up. And I said, what's going on? He said, well, there's a riot in Miami Mall, and people are saying aliens have shown up, and people are going crazy all over the place, and 100 police cars showed up. So to make a long story short, a lot of reports, eyewitness reports have come out, and they saying and stating that they did freak out because they saw these strange apparitions, and a series of videos came out. Besides the eyewitnesses, there were a couple of blurry videos from far away and blurry cell phone cameras. But then last week, in the middle of the week, a really strange creature appeared crawling across one of the malls. And we started analyzing it. Most people, that's CGI. It was a very strange creature crawling on all fours. It had a head that had a kind of a spine, very dinosaurish looking thing with 2 tails. So most of us agreed, that's probably CGI. But I have a surprise for everyone. Another video has come out, a clear video. It looks like a surveillance video in one of the malls. And I'm going to show it right now. Folks who are listening are going to have to wait to see it when we post it. Or if you tune into WBOU in Chicago, 106.9 FM tomorrow morning, 106.9 FM. Let me see, this program will be on Wednesday morning, and you will see it there. You can also follow the Morningstar Report on homenetwork.tv, and we're on in Chicago on homenetwork.tv and WVOU 106.9 FM, Monday through Fridays at 9:30. So if you missed a show on Sunday or Monday, you can always catch up by getting up early on Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, including Monday, which repeats the Sunday show. But right now I'm going to hopefully freak you out a little bit, because this really surprised me. I was going along with the CGI story last week, but this is an identical creature and it's a very different video. So I'm going to play a very short part of it, and then we're going to bring on my guest, JJ French, who is waiting in the wings, as he has so often in his career in rock and roll. And I'm going to have to ask him how it felt to perform before 100,000 people in Europe during one of his concerts. Right now, we're going to take a look at this video of this weird creature, which is the same one I saw last week in another video of the identical creature.
Whatever this thing is, question is this thing legit? They're having a slowdown here. Do you think this could be it, folks? That's the question I have for you. Do you think this could be it? It does have very long legs. Some people were saying they had very long legs and didn't look human. Or do you think this thing is not real, that this is maybe some sort of computer generated? It's hard to tell these days with any of these type of videos. It is kind of interesting, though. We had this one come out. This is clearly a sidewalk at nighttime near a town or maybe a mall, and maybe this is in the exact area. I'm not sure. The question is this an actual being that was seen on a CCTV, or was this added in? If it was done pretty well. It's got the shadowing, it's got everything. They would have spent some time on it for sure. Let me know what you guys think in the comment section below. All right, and let's get on to the next thing.
Nope, we're not going to get on
it for sure.
We're actually going to see it.
Or was this added in?
But I'm going to
mall, and maybe this is in the exact area.
I'm going
some sort of
slow
computer generated.
More.
It's hard to tell these days with any of these type of videos. It is kind of interesting, though. We had this one come out. I think this thing is not real. This is maybe some sort of computer generated.
Makes it a little creepier.
It's hard to tell these days with it. Just check this out. It seems to be walking sort of slow in a sense.
Yeah, look at this. That's the same
whatever this thing is.
Oh.
Question is this thing legit? They're having a slow down here. Do you think this could be it, folks? That's the question I have for you. Do you think this could be it? It does have very long legs. Some people were saying they had very long legs.
Yes, very long legs, and it appears to have 3 tails, a real chimera. So that's the teaser, folks. And of course, this is a huge, huge psyop. And I think that it was a test. My opinion is that this was a psychological test to see if the American people have matured since 1938 and the Orson Welles broadcast of War of the Worlds, which drove New Yorkers and people in New Jersey into panic because they tuned into a radio show like ours, and it was a radio play of Orson Welles' War of the Worlds. Not Orson Welles, H.G. Wells. Orson Welles was the narrator, but he was so convincing in his narration that people really thought New Jersey, near Princeton, New Jersey, had been invaded by Martians, that they'd come out of their spaceships, and they had exposed the New Jersey State Police to death rays, which made their cars explode in flames and disintegrating people. And since that time, that's the reason the U.S. government has been afraid to admit the reality of UFOs or the presence of extraterrestrials. So if it was a test to see if America has matured beyond 1938, psychologically and emotionally, I think everybody failed the test. The cops failed the test, and the public failed the test. And this experiment could be used as an argument by the non-disclosure faction in the government against the revelation of UFO reality and the ET presence on our planet. So stay cool. You know, next time you see a 10-foot alien, don't freak out. But don't walk up over to them and tell them, take me to your leader, because you might wind up on a flying saucer on your way to Zeta Reticuli. Okay, with that said, Peter, thank you for that update. With that said, I'd like to bring. You want to make a comment?
One thing I wanted to. I wanted to share one thing. The whole thing, metaphorically, resonates for me as like a Monsters Inc. movie. I don't know if you're familiar, but it's like a Pixar movie that was out in 2001. And I just have a little blurb here. The plot of the Monsters Inc. In a world inhabited by monsters, the city of Monstropolis harnesses the screams of human children for energy. At the Monsters Incorporated factory, skilled monsters employed as scarers venture into the human world to scare children and harvest their screams through doors that activate portals to children's bedroom closets. The work is considered dangerous as human children are believed to be toxic and capable of killing a monster through physical contact. But anyway, and the energy production at the Scream Factory, the Monsters Factory, is declining because children are becoming less scared. The whole thing reminded me of the Monsters Inc. movie.
Okay, well, I'll have to check that one out. I haven't seen it. Well, right now, I'd like to bring on another monster in the positive sense. I'd like to welcome J.J. French of the legendary group Twisted Sister. And I'm happy to say that I had a little something to do with twisting John into a new career. John and I have grown up all our lives, practically speaking, on the west side of Manhattan. And there he is. Hey, John, great to see you. Nice. He's got a nice rack of platinum records on the back, on his back wall. There's one that's got 5 in a very beautiful arc. Looks like 5 flying saucers, escorting him onto the program. John, welcome to the program. It's a pleasure to see you and an honor to have you here. So I thought, and this is my friend Peter Basilka. He's also a New Yorker. He grew up in Long Island and transplanted to Florida. And he's a rock and roller from.
Hey, I'm an '80s kid. I grew up with Twisted Sister.
I'm glad. I was wondering if you knew. Well, tell me what you thought of Twisted Sister before we go on to John. How did you get latched on to Twisted Sister?
Well, one of my friend's parents, I'm talking elementary school, but one of my friend's parents was like a born-again Christian, and he had a Twisted Sister cassette, and she found it, and she just freaked out.
Yeah.
So then after that incident, I'm like, they're cool.
Yeah. Well, we had a similar thing in Catholic school. We were not allowed to wear black leather jackets. And we were cautioned against the moral hazards of rock and roll. So let's bring on this moral hazard, J.J. French. So how you doing, John?
Hey, man. Robert, this is so surreal for me, for both of us, actually.
Yes.
It is really surreal because we have been known to each other since 1966, I believe. I in fact, I was thinking about this the other day. The very first day that I ran into you and the family and all the group, Hector and Manny and all those guys, was in the fall of 1966. I was walking down our street. I'm not going to get into the number of what street it was, but I was walking down your street, and there were your half brothers and Manny and Hector and all these guys, and they're all wearing mod colored shirts and stuff. And you weren't, because you were older. You're the older brother. Like you weren't hanging out in high school. These guys. I probably met you an hour later or the next day. Mm-hmm. But I said to them, "Well, where you guys come from?" And they pointed to the window and they go, "We live here, and we all love the same music, and we became instant friends. And because your mother allowed the band, all of us to play instruments in her living room, I mean, God bless her, that she did that, because it turned out to be a communal space in the neighborhood, and everybody kind of hung out there. And I mean, I spent untold hours in your mom's apartment, hanging out with your siblings and with their friends. And when people want to know culturally what that was like, I was like the token Jew. Everybody else was Puerto Rican or South American or Spanish or Hispanic. It was Hector Melendez, Manny Hernandez, Freddie Rivera, of course, the Echeverry family, and everybody else, and Carlos Avalares, Orlando Vieira. The list goes on and on and on, and me. And we all just love the same thing. We love the Beatles, and we love Bob Dylan, and we love Jimi Hendrix. And among the many great memories I have is the day that Sgt. Pepper came out. I listened to it in your mom's living room. Yeah. And the album, it was June 1st, 1967. We all sat around that little stereo system and played the record. And it was like, ooh, ah, ooh, we were blown away. So from my history, from the history of me growing up in the neighborhood and me just developing as a musician, your family, your mom's house was the epicenter of my life, because I couldn't do that in my house. We couldn't have drum kits up here, but you had a drum set in your house, I mean, there was keyboards and amplifiers and a drum set and cymbals and everybody, tom-toms and congas, everything. Yeah, congas and everything. And this goes on. I mean, the relationship going through, because there was a lot of cerebral stuff going on in your house. It wasn't just like drugs and hippie stuff. I mean, everybody was into chess, for example, really big time chess. Like,
John, you said the magic word. I have to make an announcement. Yeah, I am an addicted chess player. I've been playing chess on chess.com for years. I've got over 10,000 games, and I was notified yesterday that I'm among the 20% highest rated players in chess.com, which is a global chess club, and it's wonderful. I really enjoy it. But I binge on it too much.
It doesn't surprise me, because you guys had chess sets all over the place, and everyone was playing on time clocks, and it was chess, and it was kung fu, and it was mysticism and Indian and Eastern religion, and in your case Chinese and the Erdos brothers on 88th Street, and the Indians,
Native American,
the Native Americans and their religious traditions, and hanging by the bones, and your
the family, Sundance. Yeah, the Sundance that my brother performed.
I mean, I have to tell you, man, just like an incredible time. When people ask me about the whole hippie period, there was a lot of different drug cliques for sure, but that was a whole other thing going on in your mom's apartment, and all the people that would come through there, and all the interesting characters that were up there all the time. And I mean, there was the day that one of the Beach Boys came up to the house because he was driving up the street, and he heard us playing, because in the summertime the windows were open, everybody could hear the music on Broadway. And a car pulls up, and it's a limousine. And, I just remember your mother or someone coming up going, Beach Boy downstairs, whatever.
I answered the door.
In walks Bruce Johnson from the Beach Boys. I mean, I've gone over this conversation with Louis recently, with your brother, because I was like, he did show up, didn't he? Didn't he walk in? Like, what? How did that happen? He goes, well, he heard us playing. He came upstairs. I guess the Beach Boys were in Manhattan at the time.
Yeah, exactly.
And they were driving up the street, and he hears us, and he comes upstairs, and I think it was Rudy, because Rudy is such a wise ass, like Rudy is such a wise ass. I could hear Rudy go, "Red, you're one of the Beach Boys. Help me, Rhonda. Like, prove it to me, or play fun, or play, surf and safari or whatever." And he did all those things. And like, oh my God. Another crazy thing that people don't understand is that Twisted Sister has had 14 members of the band, the 5 guys that most people know in the videos, but there were many original members that are no longer with the band. But what they don't know is one person, the only person who ever refused to join the band was your brother. In 1975, I was retooling the band for the 15th time before Dee joined, and I said, I could use a much more of a percussionist drummer. And I said to Rudy, would you do it? And he said, "No, man, no."
Well, let me tell you why.
He's the only guy who said no. So and then look, Robert. Of course, you evolve. You evolve on so many unbelievable levels, and I listened to late night radio like George Norrie and Richard Syrett, and as time went on, as I'd hear these shows. Robert Morningstar is a guest on the show. And I'm thinking, my God, you've developed this incredible following, in pursuing all the different avenues that you pursue. And so here we are, Robert. Here we are, 55 years later.
Yes.
And both having podcasts.
Yes. Let me tell the people, JJ French has something that's really cool. It's got a cool name, easy to remember, the JJ French Connection, right? And that really dovetails with a lot of really interesting things, intrigues, history. John contacted me in November out of the blue because he said, by the way, not Richard Syrett, Richard Hoagland. That's the program that I appear on.
No, but Syrett filled in for Norrie at times.
Oh, yes.
On a show, and you were on one of those fill-in shows as well. Yeah. So that's what I'm saying.
Well, anyway, here's the deal. John calls me because of the JFK anniversary was coming on, and John says to me, Robert, I went out with Marita Lorenz's daughter, and I flipped out because Marita Lorenz was a CIA spy who was hired by the CIA to kill Castro. And he went out with her daughter, and he told me the most intriguing story that you're ever going to hear about a little girl trying to protect her mother. But we're going to save that because right now I want to play a song. I want to direct people to an article that I've posted on the Morningstar Report, the newsletter, as it used to be called, but now it's just the Morningstar Report. And it features this interview. And we're now going to hear a song that I chose specially for this show, which is, I think, Twisted Sister's biggest hit. I may stand corrected, but the one I remember most is We're Not Gonna Take It. And this one is unique because he's backed up by a mariachi band. So we're gonna let it crank up as it usually does. And we're gonna hear a few, there we go.
Oh, we're not gonna take it. We ain't gonna take it. No lo tomaremos nunca más. We've got the right to choose it. There ain't no way we'll lose it. This is our life. This is our song. We'll fight the powers that be just
was great, I have to say. John, who was the lead singer or is the lead singer? The blonde man?
That's Dee Snider.
Dee Snider. I've never had the pleasure of meeting her, but that was great. No lo toleraremos más. We won't tolerate it anymore. That was really great.
Yeah.
And you got a drummer that looked like Rudy, of all things. I just noticed the guy on the drums. He was very, very good.
The story behind that is that we're not going to take it as a worldwide anthem.
Yes.
It is sung in many languages in many countries. It's been used in more commercials, soundtracks, TV shows than any other heavy metal song. We were contacted by Hornitos Tequila, and they said they would like us to do a mariachi version for Cinco de Mayo about 10 years ago. And so we did that version with a mariachi band. And, it's just another example of the universal nature of the band and about how when we started the band, 50 years ago, nobody knew, how long anything could last. And here we have songs that are lasting generations.
Yeah. Well, let me tell my end of the story of the genesis of John's career as the guitarist of Twisted Sister. As John has said, we've known each other since 1966, and the way I got to know John is that my brothers and I all went to parochial school. I went on to Power Memorial, college prep. My younger brother, Rudy, the drummer, he went to the High School of Music and Art. And my brother Lou didn't want to go to Catholic school anymore, Catholic high school, so he went to PS 85. And that's where John also went to school. So I meet John, and as he was talking about it, it was the hippie days, and it was the Beatles and everything. It was cool to have long hair, and you weren't cool if you didn't have long hair. Unfortunately, I was going to Power Memorial, and we weren't allowed long hair. But I meet this a minstrel, a country singer, long hair. John had really long hair down to his shoulders, and he had an acoustic guitar. And as he said, our house was a center for intellectual as well as musical growth. And as I was studying psychology and Tai Chi, I picked up a book a couple of years later. This is a couple of years after we've known each other. And the book is called The Master Game by Dr. Robert S. DeRock. And I read that book, and it was the perfect synthesis of what I was practicing. It combined Taoism and Jungian psychology, and a great manual for self-development. So I said, John, you have to, read this book. And he said, yeah. Comes back a few days later. He said, oh, man, that book changed my life. Now I know what I've got to do. I've been fiddling around here, playing, folk guitar, and I want to be a rock star, so I know what I've got to do. And he cut his hair. He formed the band. The next time I saw him, he invited me to go to Brooklyn to a place called Popeyes, where one of the first performances of Twisted Sister was happening. So I jumped in my Firebird and went out there. And I show up, and John was already tall. I think he was 6'1". And I show up, and he's like 6'5" with these giant heels. He's all decked out and glitter, and whoa, what a transformation. And they rocked out the house. And John, the next thing I remember was that we all bonded around the Beatles and Sgt. Pepper's, right? Listening to the first Sgt. Pepper's album on my stereo, right? With the two speakers split off from the turntable. And he says to me, hey, come out to our show in Brooklyn at Popeyes this weekend. We're going to have I think it was a Band the Beatles concert. I said, what? He said, we're bringing everybody and asking everybody to bring their Beatles records, and we're going to smash them. And I think it was at the time when
no, it was
John
disco
Lennon
albums is what it was.
Oh,
right?
Was it disco?
It was disco records, yeah.
Oh, I thought it was Beatles.
No. It was the
John Lennon had become so controversial. Yeah, disco. That's right. And this was really iconoclastic because Brooklyn was the disco capital of the world.
Yeah, it was.
Right.
2001.
Now I stand corrected. Yeah. So tell me more. What how did you go on after that to such heights, man? Look, you sent me that picture of you performing before 100,000 people in Europe. What was that like?
You know, that was the culmination of years and years and years and years of work. It's like saying to somebody who's starring on Broadway, what's it like to star on Broadway? And they said, well, before I started on Broadway, I was in a million little shows. I was in a million plays. You know, I was in a million little things. And over time, you know, I auditioned and I kept trying and I kept trying. And then the opportunities came up as the length of time goes on. There's if you don't quit. You know, it's the same thing with people that win gold medals in the Olympics. You know, you just don't wake up one morning and win a gold medal. You maybe at the age of 10, you see the Olympics and you see somebody do the giant slalom and you go, man, that's what I want to do. And then, you know, for the next 20 years, you're up at 8 o'clock at 5 in the morning and you're going down hills, and then you enter small contests. And, you know, the point is, by the time you get to the big time, Robert, by the time you're exposed to the challenges of the enormity of it, you are so inured to the shock value that it's another job. And I don't mean to diminish it in any capacity, because it's a wondrous thing to stand in front of 100,000 people and have them sing "We're Not Going to Take It." But we've done it, you know, dozens and dozens and dozens of times, you know. So when you first start playing in front of 30 people, then you play in front of, you know, a couple of hundred people, then you play in front of a couple of thousand people, then eventually you play in front of 5,000 people. From there you play, you know, you get to an arena like a Madison Square Garden, you play in front of 15,000 people, then you do outside shows, and then you're doing it in front of 30,000. And as every step of the way that you do this, you're learning the craft of entertaining in a big area. And to add on to all of that, all these platinum records you see behind me started out with an acetate, you know, made in 1979, the first time we ever turned a tape into an acetate before we turned into a record. You know, that was a marvel of an experience. That was, wow, it's an acetate. It's this piece of plastic that says our name, that we could use it to print a record. And the first time we saw a single, it was unbelievable. And then the first time we saw an album, it was unbelievable. But you know, that only lasts for a short period of time. Then you say to yourself, well, who's buying this record? And is it going to get on the radio? And the first time you hear your song on the radio, you go, oh my God, I can't believe I'm hearing my song on the radio. And then that gets old pretty quick, because you want to hear it more on the radio and you want to sell records. You know, so selling 100 records is fun in the beginning. And then you want to sell 1,000 records. And then you want to sell 10,000 records. And then you want to sell 250,000 records, because everybody's being judged by record sales, you know, and then the pressure's on. How many records can you sell? And what you see behind me here is I've got 37 gold and platinum albums from 30 million sold around the world, in eight countries. And it, you know what, Robert, if I look at it, if I just look at it, I go, wow, that's a life. But the life that led to it, that's the story in the book that I wrote, Twisted Business. It's the story of how
you wrote a book.
Tell us happened. You know, that's a story about how that happened. And it's a long story, you know, because the band was turned down more times in a bedsheet in a whorehouse. And you know, and we've come back more times than Freddy Krueger. So the experience of rejection is all over my life. And you're an entertainer. And you know, because you are, you know, you're a searcher and you're an entertainer.
Yeah, and I performed as well for years and years and years. People don't know that I performed in the dance world, but in the dance world here in America, you don't get far if you're not queer. And so, being a straight dancer, classical, gymnastic, jazz, ballet. And I got into dance because of my fascination with human body locomotion. And so I discovered the oldest dance in the world through translating a Chinese poem that was written in 755. After I learned to read Chinese, I found this poem about something called rainbow dancing, which actually turned out to be the origins of Tai Chi Chuan, which was a kind of whirling dervish dance and puts you into mystical states. And that was a very fruitful and rich part of my life, contemporaneous with yours. But the thing I get from you, and I think the audience should get, is to persevere, right? Don't let one failure or one rejection knock you down or make you doubt yourself. Keep going, keep believing in yourself, keep writing, keep composing, keep performing. And like that song that John probably didn't like, that wanted to smash the record, Staying Alive, John Travolta, Saturday Night Fever, that started the whole disco thing. But Staying Alive, it involves having motivation, having perseverance. Winners never quit and quitters never win. But tell me about your book, because I'm fascinated. I didn't know you wrote Twisted Business. Is it on Amazon?
Yeah, it's on Amazon. I do motivational speaking. I mean, here it is.
Twisted Business. Yeah, I see
Twisted
it.
Business, and it's basically lessons from my life in rock and roll. I'll more than happy to give you a copy of it.
Okay.
You know, in the book, you know, in the book, because the band's done 9,000 shows, you know, and I have them all listed in the back of the book. It's an insane read, because it tells you what it took for the band to make it, and it was very, 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 very tough. By the way, the picture of 100,000 people. Here's a picture of us playing in front of 100,000 people.
That's amazing. It's
right?
Really
but that's happened, you know, like hundreds of times, which is, by the way, which is how you get measured in my world for the success that you have. You know, can you play in front of 100,000 people? Can you headline concerts in front of 100,000 people? The answer is, if you're really good, you can. You know, if you do something 9,000 times, Robert, and you still suck at it, maybe you're in the wrong business, you know?
That's right. That's right.
So we learned how to be
if you
really,
do it
really
9,000 times, you're going to improve a little bit, you know?
Yeah,
And
here,
you
by
love
the
it.
way,
That's
there's the picture of Robert. There's a picture of Robert of when you met me.
Yeah, that's right.
Basically it.
The long-haired hippie with the guitar. It's unforgettable. That's beautiful.
Yeah. That's me standing on the corner of
Center. Yeah, there you go.
of
And the street is 92nd Street. It's the house on 92nd Street.
Yeah.
There's a famous movie by that name.
But you know what you said about the cliches about success. You know, it's not how many times you get knocked down. It's how many times you get you get back up. There's a lot of famous phrases. I used to manage an artist who was a writer, and he wrote a song, and there's a line in the song. He wrote a gospel song, and there's a line in the gospel song. This guy is the most optimistic person I have ever met in my life. He's had obstacle after obstacle after obstacle thrown at him. And he wrote a song called I Say Grace. And there's a line in I Say Grace that I love. And when I tell you the line, you will appreciate it, because it is so inspirational, right? And the line is, and when the roof caves in, it lets the sunshine in.
That's beautiful.
It's a beautiful line, isn't it?
Yes, it is.
And it speaks to people who are like us, who are resilient and come back time after time after time after time. But you know, Robert, let me tell you what blew me away about you. When you were studying Chinese and learning how to write, I remember going up to your apartment many years ago and you were writing Chinese. Tell me what it's like to understand how to understand Chinese and how to write Chinese. I find that to be way more difficult than playing guitars. Explain that.
Oh, man. I'll tell you, John, learning Chinese was the easiest language that I ever studied. I grew up speaking Spanish and English. I studied French and Latin in high school. And I love the language. You know, I have a facility. When I got into Chinese, everybody said, oh, Chinese is so difficult. I absorbed Chinese very easily. I had ways of making associations between Chinese sounds and other language sounds. But writing and learning to write Chinese, first I had the inspiration of the Tai Chi Grandmaster, Professor Cheng, who was a world-renowned calligrapher. Mm-hmm. And I learned by studying. He gave classes. We'd get these gigantic, all we needed was 2 copies of the New York Sunday Times because he taught us to do calligraphy on newspapers. But writing Chinese is very easy because all you're doing is drawing pictures of the objects. In English, we draw a picture of the sound. Got it? It's phonetic. So we draw a picture of the sound, then we repeat the sound internally, and we get the idea. In Chinese, they draw a picture of the object or the concept. And there are 214 basic radicals. They're called the roots of Chinese, 214 concepts. And then by combinations and permutations, you get, hundreds of thousands of Chinese ideas and characters. But I warned people, and they did this in China. Communists, whenever they take over, the first thing they do is destroy the language. So when the Chinese came in, they would yearly put out lists of words that should never again be spoken or written, and they expunged them. And that's where they came up with simplified Chinese. But I learned the classical Chinese, and it was really a pleasure when I went to China and went to the Forbidden City. I was there with the guides, and they had these giant stones, steles, with Chinese inscriptions. And I get up there and I start reading them, and they go, "You can read that?" I said, "Yeah." And he said, "Oh, you're very handsome." But handsome, that's, the word is hen ming bai. But ming bai, meaning bright and intelligent, also means handsome. So the Chinese guide, "Oh, you're very handsome." And I said, "Oh, I think I know what you mean." But anyway, I encourage everyone to learn another language, because if you only speak one language, you're really stuck in a monoscopic view of the world. And you find out that the object is not the sound, right? The object is the object. And there are many sounds in various languages to describe the same object, like chair, yizi, table, zhuozi. And your mind grows. The other thing that's interesting, John, since you asked the question, is that the Chinese reading is something that happens in the right brain, and American or English Western reading happens in the left brain. And it's really a trip to traverse from one side of the brain to the other. I spoke Chinese and got into it so deeply that at times my English started to come out with a Chinese sound or Chinese accent. And I had to make a choice. What was I going to think in the rest of my life, Chinese or English? And then I thought about one thing. There is no language on this planet that gives you more freedom than English, and more power to create than English. The ability to say I shall and I will does not exist in the Chinese language. You could say I plan to, I would like to, it would be desirable, but I will or I shall. And of course, I love America. And I feel very enriched by Chinese, and I encourage everyone to dabble in it. And that's what you do. You put the paintbrush in the inkwell, and you hold it vertically like this, and then you start to move it, and it starts to take a life of its own. So thank you for asking that question, John.
Well, I just think that it speaks extremely well of your intellectual searching, and it's always been amazing to me. And we crossed paths on this Kennedy situation.
Yes.
Because of course, with the anniversary coming up, I thought to myself, wow, you're quoted all the time. I mean, every time there's an anniversary in a magazine or a newspaper, it's Robert Morningstar says. And I said to my producer, I said, I don't know if you know who Robert Morningstar is, but this guy gets quoted all the time when there's an anniversary of the Kennedy assassination. With the 60th anniversary coming up, I'm going to get this guy. And he said, how are you going to get him? I said, because I grew up with him. That's how I'm getting him. I grew up with the guy. He's not going to say no to me. By the way, here's a picture of me standing in front of the Kennedy headquarters.
With Robert Jr.?
And this is John. No, this is me standing in front of the John F. Kennedy campaign headquarters on 90th Street and Broadway in 1960.
When he came to 90th Street and Broadway, yes, he was here.
Because Robert came to 90th and Broadway in 1968, but John Kennedy came up in 1960, and my mother was running this campaign headquarters at the time.
Goodness, John, that was at Halloween time. That was at Halloween, that October. It was just a couple of days before the election, and everybody was waiting for hours and hours and hours for JFK to arrive. I didn't know your mother was heading the campaign, but I used to hang out. I tell people I campaigned for John F. Kennedy. I used to hang out at the Democratic headquarters, which was right there on Amsterdam Avenue across the street from where you live. You recall?
Well, actually, there was two. The FDR Woodrow Wilson Club was on 96th Street between Amsterdam and Columbus, and the Riverside Democratic Club was on 88th and Broadway. And the Kennedy headquarters, my mother worked for Adlai Stevenson first.
Yeah.
And his headquarters was on Broadway between 92nd and 93rd Street, but then he lost in the primaries to Kennedy, and she went and she worked for the Kennedy campaign after that.
Well, that one changed. That one was for Stevenson, changed for Kennedy. And I tell people there was no internet in those days. There was very little television advertising, and I had thousands of pamphlets, and I climbed up and down 15-story buildings, every one of them on the west side, dropping pamphlets at people's doors to get JFK elected. Well, listen, John, we're at the. I want to go back to that, and I want to talk about you and Marita Lorenz and the story that brought us together for the anniversary. This is Robert Morningstar. We're about 1 minute from the break, and I don't want to start a really deep conversation like that one to have to interrupt it. But I ask you folks to go to revolution.radio and make a contribution. Go to freedomslips.org. You can go there and make a contribution. You can donate through Patreon. You can buy something at the Zazzle store, at the Rev Radio store. And you can also make contributions to the Morningstar Report by going to PayPal and finding my name, Robert D. Morningstar, or robert.morningstar at gmail.com. Don't forget to subscribe to Substack, Robert Morningstar at substack.com. There are the dulcet tones of our station break, and we'll be back in 3 minutes with J.J. French and Peter Basolka and History of the West Side.
Listen to Revolution Radio at freedomslips.com, and we'll be right back after this message.